Hello, this is the Circularity Catalyst podcast, where regenerative thinking meets real-world strategy. I'm your host, Ken Alston. Hello, this is Ken Alston with the Circularity Catalyst podcast, and my special guest today is Scott Charon. He is the Director of Sustainability at MillerKnoll, one of the leading furniture manufacturers, and we've known each other for, 25 years, Scott, which is that's a frightening thing to admit in public for both of us. And we were both involved in some of Miller's early work in sustainability. I'd like to use that shared history today, not simply to be nostalgic, but to understand what's genuinely changed over that period.
Yeah.
And what hasn't. So for listeners who don't know you, your full background, can you share who you are, the role you play at MillerKnoll today, and say a little bit about how sustainability shows up in the organization?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, Scott Charon, I am Director of Sustainable Strategy and Reporting at MillerKnoll, formerly known as Herman Miller. So a few years ago, Herman Miller bought Knoll, and now we're MillerKnoll. So we've been going through an integration for the last 4 years. So as you mentioned, I've been involved in the early days of Cradle to Cradle, along with our current Vice President of Sustainability, Gabe Wing. So we've been teamed up together for a long time, and we were brought on board. I came in as a supply chain expert, and Gabe came in as a chemical engineer, and it was our job to implement the cradle-to-cradle methodology within Herman Miller. So things have changed, but some things have changed, and some things have stayed the same over that period of time.
Right. Well, back at the beginning, as you were saying, that the priority then was to understand what the ideas, the concepts behind cradle-to-cradle design were, and then to start thinking about how they get implemented inside an organization of the size and scale of Herman. Was that really the main focus of the work at that time, to do the certification work, to understand materials and design for disassembly, things of that sort?
Exactly. So it's really, one of the first things we were doing is getting to know what our commodities were. So we buy a lot of wood, we buy a lot of steel, we buy aluminum, just a number of different materials. And, within the cradle-to-cradle methodology, going down to the molecular structure of what's in those materials. So it was breaking down each and every material that went into every product that we were taking a look at. A good example was the Aeron chair, which is a iconic Herman Miller product, been around since 1994. So over 30 years. That was one of the first projects that we looked at. So we were breaking down what materials were made of the frame, the pellicle, the arm pads, the tilt mechanism. So we would go into every screw and getting with those suppliers and saying, hey, we need to know what chemicals are in there, what finishes are in there, and breaking those down from a human health and environmental standpoint. And then, on the end of life, making sure that these materials are coated in a way that we can recycle these materials at the end of life. And we've been continuing to do that. So one thing that's still today is, chemistry is still majorly important to our work, but it's more like table stakes. It's more like expected, where, in 2001 to probably 2007, it was a leading edge way of thinking, and it just became the way people did things within our products. So that's what Gabe and I did, is we were tasked with that. We were going out to supply chain, working with supply management, putting many non-disclosures in place to get the chemical information. And as many have experience with this type of work, sometimes the answer is no, that's proprietary. We can't give you that information. But, with some negotiation and working with our supply chain group and the leadership group at that time, we were able to overcome some of those challenges and able to get that information. So that work is able to be done.
Yeah, that's still fundamentally important work, isn't it? And, it's what I call knowing everything that's in everything that's in everything, as a little sort of shorthand.
Exactly.
And sometimes, those confidentiality agreements sometimes need to be handled with a third party so that they get to see the secret sauce, but you can still get the results that you need to do your assessment.
Yeah, so we still do that today, but carbon is a big driver for our business today, and trying to measure the carbon footprint of our products.
We'll move on to that in a moment. Just staying with that early work with the Aeron. I remember, I think there was a time when we tried to take apart one of the Aerons, and we had a big white sheet on the floor, and everybody was a little bit struggling at the time because it was
Right.
designed for assembly and not disassembly. Is my
Right.
recollection correct?
Yep, that is correct. Yeah, so when you have some areas that are tough to get at, being able to break apart a, five-star base with the casters and then the tilt. A tilt is the internal components that make the chair able to tilt back. And sometimes those are really tough to get to because you've got a number of different ways to kind of pound and break them. And, in the early days, Gabe and I were going to the hardware store and buying tools in order to figure out
Right.
ways to disassemble. And
Yep.
then sometimes the information was not on hand that we needed for the weight of the product because it wasn't something that we had typically tracked in the past. So we had to go and break apart a tilt because that was we call that a purchase complete mechanism where it comes in to our
Ready
shop with
made.
all of those 50 to 80 components that are in there, and we need to break them and weigh them and understand what materials are in there. So but
And of course,
over
at the
time we've
time,
overcome that.
yeah, and at the time you were starting, no one ever had as part of the design specification for those parts that they needed to be able to be taken apart. They just had to
Correct.
function and fulfill
Yep.
their whatever their mechanical, and practical function was.
Yep.
So looking back, what something early on that turned out to be more complex than and more difficult than expected? Was it really that going down the supply chain part? Or was there something
I
else?
think it was that. And then when you identify a material that you want to try to remove, a good example of that is Gabe spent many, many months at one of our suppliers working to take PVC out of the arm pad for Aeron
I
and
remember.
finding ways to look at that. And then Mira chair was another one that Gabe worked on. So I actually spent some time trying to find a way to get self-skinning urethane for the Aeron chair. And when we were launching the Mira chair, which was the first chair within our industry that was cradle to cradle certified and modified there, we were working with 7.5, which are the designers, and we were looking at disassembly and assembly instructions of how to look at those materials. And they did a really good job of being able to disassemble those components. So I think two things is when you look at materials that you're trying to fix and substitute, there's a lot of work that goes into that. So the big thing is if you get it done upright, right first, you're able to eliminate any of that rework that you have to do to a product. So that's really what our focus has been since we started that. So chemistry and trying to find alternatives.
And when you start, you're starting obviously from a blank slate and you have very little information available to you about that chemistry. Maybe a little from the material safety data sheet, but not a lot typically in
Right.
those, at the least of the depth that you need to do a full assessment. And it can seem very daunting, but one of the things I remember, if I remember correctly, that you did, which I think was a very smart move, was to make that leap of saying, well, this is something we have to put into all of our future production work.
Yep.
And so as you do the work, understanding the materials and coming out with the better chemistry, then that's then available and should be a prioritized material for the next generation in another chair or another system. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yep, having that database of materials that you've already vetted, you've already proven, and then if we're looking at, hey, what's the next generation of a seating product, we can pull from those materials, and we've already vetted the chemistry and looked at, self-skinning urethane is a good example too. Is that has been like the way that we have got away from PVC from 25 years ago, is going to a self-skinning urethane and getting away from those problematic materials that are problematic in the making of.
Right. You mentioned, carbon as a current focus. Is that probably one of the biggest differences from then to now? How that's come
Yeah,
to the fore?
exactly. So I would say over the last, maybe 8 to 10 years, our customers, as they try to reduce the carbon footprint of their, scope one, scope two, and scope three, we are their scope three category. And if they're purchasing our products, they're asking us, what is the carbon footprint of your products? What projects do you have on board that you're looking to reduce the carbon? So about 2 years ago, we implemented a team within MillerKnoll called Team Carbon, led by Tayo Afric. And that group is a group of 6 people that come in every day and try to figure out how they can take carbon out of those materials. So we jokingly say we're putting Mira, some of our other products, on a carbon diet, and we're trying to find ways to, innovatively take, weight, which equates to carbon, and carbon by substituting materials. For example, if you had a plastic material, a nylon 6 that has recycled content, that is actually a lower carbon footprint of that product. So we're looking at those types of materials, and that has really been a big one. And I've been involved in like the corporate reporting of our scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3. And we are on our third iteration at MillerKnoll of our Better World report. And there's a ton of information on all the different things that we're doing related to product, to all those different categories that we focus on. But yes, I would say carbon is the most complex and the biggest driver of what we see our customers looking for today.
And would you say that prioritization that's emerged is, in a sense, a risk to the business if you don't deal with it because it's something that your customers are asking for?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you need to perform, and that's why, we had the foresight to bring in Team Carbon, and we've been focused on sustainability and carbon for a while now. And I would say, yeah, if you're not able to provide the information, if you're not, able to, show customers that you've got a program that you're focusing on reducing carbon and trying to find ways that they can reduce carbon, definitely that could be a sticking point for them wanting to procure materials.
One of the other things that's emerged, out of the cradle to cradle work in some respects is, the generic name now of the circular economy. How does that play into your work? The end of use part when the chair is not really functioning anymore.
Yeah, I would say, in my experience and probably most everybody's experience, that's the toughest area to capture, to connect, to work on, because there's an economic element to that. So, when you look at the cost of sending, materials to landfill versus the cost of hiring people to recycle, sometimes it's a real challenge from an economic standpoint. But at MillerKnoll, we've got a program called Repurpose. So we offer that to our customers, and our customers can look at different ways that they can reuse, recycle, or donate products if they want to buy new material or new product from us, new seating, new furniture, and they can donate that. They can look at recycling, and we've got a very strong presence in North America today, and we're looking to expand that globally because we feel that's like the last thing that we need to work on from closing that is like making the economics work with that, because it's a really tough area because everybody's so different. There's different recycling rules and regulations globally, and just makes it a really, really challenging area. But we're definitely looking at that, focused on that, and trying to figure out how we can continue to use Repurpose as a program to close the loop.
Yeah, is there any sort of repair involved in that? Is there a repair and refurbishment to
So we're
cycle?
Yep. So we're investigating that, and definitely, if there's a way that we can work with our customers that, let's just say, for example, they bought, 100,000, or I'm sorry, we'll just say 1,000 Aeron chairs in 2005. So they've been out in the market for, beyond their warranty, but our products last a long time. So part of sustainability is durability and longevity and quality of the product. So if we make a quality product that we can maybe look at those 1,000 products, replace a couple arms, replace some casters, do a 10-point inspection on those. So those are some things that we're looking at too, is like, how can we make these products last even longer because we build our products to last.
Yeah, and the embedded carbon that's in that original manufacture is then saved and not have to
exactly
be added back to your calculations again.
And we do have some of our customers that, they manage their own, furniture, and they're asking us like, hey, if we were to divert those, 1,000 chairs from, move it from Florida to, let's just say, Seattle or wherever, they are looking to say, they're coming to us and say, hey, what is the carbon savings from doing that? So we actually have a life cycle assessment team, and we work with a software called Gabby, and we're looking at creating EPDs, LCAs, so that our customers can understand what the carbon footprint of those products are today, and doing some of those analysis of what the carbon footprint would be on the savings of reuse of product.
Is there something you have on your list of to-dos that you would have expected more progress on right now, and it's been more challenging to do than you originally thought it might be?
I would say the carbon footprint of our materials. So we work with our supply group, we're working with operations, and that's a tough area to take carbon out of commodity materials. So we're looking at ways can we work with our supply chain to look at their scope 1 and scope 2, their gas and their electricity, and how does that convert into a savings of carbon that eventually filters through to MillerKnoll? So, I'd say all areas are challenging in sustainability. We have signed up for the SBTI short-term goal for 2030, and we're all validated on that. And then we've also made a public commitment for SBTI for a 2050 goal for net zero carbon. So that is where we're working on and trying to get that plan validated. So I think the short term, sometimes when you've been doing this stuff for a long time, the low-hanging fruit has been picked. And it becomes more challenging and more challenging to find other areas to really take carbon out. But as I mentioned, we've got a strong team, and the really, really awesome thing at MillerKnoll is we've got commitment from the top of the organization. So I think that's inherently important for companies. When you're a middle manager trying to push these ideas up to the LT group, and the LT group isn't committed to those things, I've seen other companies really struggle. And I've been very fortunate to work at a company that has the vision, has the leadership that understands that this stuff is important. We've been doing it voluntarily for 25 years, and we're going to continue to do that work. And regulations come down the pipe too. So we have a group that works on the regulatory compliance part of sustainability as well, because those are emerging and they're different in other countries. But I would just say really feel blessed that you talk to the leadership group at MillerKnoll, and everybody knows that we're on a journey. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint. We're trying to, make a huge momentum push towards, being the leader in sustainability.
And how does that trickle down to the rest of the company? Obviously, you're in the sustainability group, and so it's front and center for you every day. But how does that commitment that you see from the top in your work, how does that diffuse more widely?
Yeah, well, we have other groups. We have a BRG, which is a business resource group, and it is a group of people who are interested in sustainability, and anybody at MillerKnoll can be part of that. They meet about once a month, and our team doesn't drive that. It's really an independent group that they might pick up some skunk work projects related to sustainability. One of the really cool things is Herman Miller had some community gardens back in the 50s.
I remember.
And those were brought back over the last few years. And so
you
that
made
group,
honey, didn't you? You made honey there on the site?
Well, we're actually growing some vegetables and flowers, and so the employees have an area within some of our farm areas that we can farm. So it's been a really cool group, and they'll peppers and different things that they'll grow, and then the employees take those. So just kind of a really fun little activity that our team can do. Right. But yeah, the honey is another one that we've looked at. But I would say I'll get to honey in a second. But the trickle down effect is if you're looking to work, say you're in finance and you want to work for a company that has a great sustainability story and vision, people want to come to MillerKnoll because they know that they're going to work for a company that's committed and working on those types of things. So it trickles down in different ways that you don't think about, related to not just customer demands.
What would you say is something that you wish people outside could see that's usually hidden from you? The inside stuff that gets done that's actually super cool and interesting, but it doesn't always get the visibility outside. What comes to your mind in that arena?
Probably going back to the leadership. Just our leaders are just fully committed, to sustainability, and it's inherent. It's part of our DNA, is what I say. It's just part of our DNA, and we walk the talk for that type of activity.
So when you think more broadly about sustainability, so when you see some posts online and social media, there's good stuff and there's a lot of not so good stuff, in my humble opinion. What would you say sustainability, the word, means within?
Jeez.
I mean, I don't expect the academic definition because I don't
Yeah, I
think that's
mean,
very valuable.
it probably is, sustainability meant like really being strong in chemistry years ago. Now those are table stakes. So I would say sustainability is like, making sure that we're a leader, making sure that we're on top of like, where's the puck going, right? We want to know where the puck is going. And I would say that just making sure that we understand that we're committed and, we can execute on the activity that we're trying to achieve, and a lot of that can be seen in our Better World report that I mentioned earlier.
Well, and I think the title of that, "The Better World," is good. It's obviously positively oriented, right? It's not
Yep,
just
yep,
trying to be less bad, which I think is a fundamental thing that we all learned in the early cradle days.
yep.
But I think beyond that, for me, I talk now about sustainability as really at the meta level being the ability to ensure that as we live and work as individuals and collectively in our jobs and our companies, that we're sustaining the conditions that allow life to exist on Earth. It's a very
Yep,
precious place, right?
yep.
And why is carbon important? Well, in many times we don't get past, oh, it's carbon, oh, it's global warming, oh, but why? Why is it that? And we skip over the fact that, well, we're risking the conditions that actually support life on Earth. So
Exactly.
there's an absolutely fundamental level of sustainability which almost goes beyond, and it's at this higher meta level than just, oh, well, we have to deal with carbon, right?
Yep,
We do have to
exactly.
deal with carbon, and it's clear why it's a priority. But I think viscerally people don't get that connection back to, well, if we don't have things that set up the right way, we're going to undermine the very conditions that allow us to live and for other species to
Exactly.
live. And so there's a real strong, anchor to this. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but in some ways it is because it's about life.
It is.
So when you look forward now to the next decade or 25 years, I know it's an impossible question because if you go back to where you and I were 25 years ago, we probably wouldn't have said that we'd be where we are today doing what we do exactly, right? It's very hard to be a sage and predict the future. Do you think that carbon's going to remain the main focus for the next few years, or is there anything else that's
Yeah,
lurking and that's moving, isn't here yet, but may come soon?
that's a great question. I think it might become table stakes, right? Like chemistry and circularity has become table stakes. It might be carbon's just part of the process, and what's the next thing that's out there? Is it lean manufacturing? Is the end of life really where the focus is going to be, and how do you recapture these materials, these products, and basically we're not mining anymore. We're not, maybe we have sustainable forestry, but that's regenerative, and so that's a good thing. But when you're taking steel and aluminum out of the ground, you're mining,
You're
you're
not replanting
using
those.
heat, beat, and repeat. I think that's been talked about a lot, and in the past, and so it might be that the end of life becomes the major focus of
Yeah,
our products, and how can you become more lean? How can you like the landfills are closed. What do you do then?
right.
How do you do if that's not an option? How would you look at the way your business is run? How would you look at the
Yeah,
materials?
no, the whole corporate social responsibility and the emergence of um, having to deal with materials you put into the world, right? Once they're no longer usable, having some responsibility and not just going, well,
Exactly.
we sold it. There you go. It's your problem now.
Yep. So that could be extended producer responsibility. Could
Exactly.
be like you sell it, you own it, and you need to figure out what you're going to do with it, and you own it throughout the full process of the life cycle.
Is there a rental or leasing side to your work?
Not really. I think that becomes more of a like a business transaction. So it's like a transactional. Like, do you want to rent or
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
buy? So really, we're in this buying condition today.
Right, right.
So that never really vetted out, in our industry per se at this point in time. So
Yeah.
that maybe that was where things change over time. I
Yeah,
just
it's one of those
where
areas
the
I think
puck
is
might be going.
lurking. Yeah, I think it's a
Yeah.
lurking thing that why do I need to own the chair that I'm sat on? I don't.
Yep. Yep.
I
And
just
Bill
I
talked
just
about
need
that,
renting services, right?
and Bill talked about that years ago as part of that philosophy.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's one of the reasons I talk a lot about needing companies needing an internal radar because
Yep.
when the air traffic controllers are watching the skies, the planes are moving. Some things are coming in, some things are going away, some are moving faster than others, and it's a complex matrix, right?
Right.
I think that's true of all of the topics that are under this rubric of sustainability, which, as you well know, has hundreds of subsets of things that have to be looked at under that headline. And some of them are right there front and center. And for you now, carbon is there, right? That's right in the middle of your radar. It's near in, and you have to deal with it. But I think it's important to look at some of these things that are on the periphery that are moving, and some of them might be moving away. Like you said, chemistry hasn't sort of moved away, but it's staying where it is, right? You have to deal with it as table stakes.
It's expected, right? Like quality was a big deal in the 90s, and it's expected now.
Yeah. But there are other things that are lurking around that are moving, and you may or may not have the peripheral vision unless you put in some processes to track those things.
Yeah.
What stands out to me is that I think we're seeing a start of a trend to go away from just optimizing, because as you say, when you do the optimizing, the efficiency work, that low-hanging fruit gets done pretty quickly. You can easily get that sold into the management because it saves money. You're using less stuff, it costs less, helps the bottom line. But you can't take all the material out of the chair before it collapses, right? And so there are limits to the optimization. And that leads you to more into what I call stewardship, right? It's this more long-term thinking of how do we do the right things, and then defining what the right things are.
And then when you look at carbon, when we looked at chemistry, when we looked at materials, back in the 2001 timeframe, we were putting a new constraint into the system of thinking, into the way of design. So like carbon is now the next constraint that's part of the design process when we work with our engineers, when we work with our new product development team. So it's just yet another constraint that you need to look at, that you need to vet. Do we need to build our chair to last 100 years, or can it last 50 years? And the design might be a little bit different, but it still meets all the criteria. But you just might think of a different way to design the tool in order to perform the function of whatever that area of the chair is, or part of the office furniture that you're sitting in.
Well, Scott, I'm glad that you and I have been around for the long haul in this, and you and MillerKnoll continue to have this view into the future that is trying our best to do what's needed to meet some of these difficult challenges. It's very tough when the actual structures in which business takes place are somewhat fixed, and even just the little foray we had into talking about renting versus buying is an example of where, in many cases, we're stuck in an old system, and that may require some changes at the customer side to see the value of changing some of the business models, so that then you can be more completely in harmony with your customer and not trying to force something on an unwilling buyer. Have you any closing reflections that you'd like to leave?
No. Just good to catch up with you, Ken. Appreciate the time with you today, and so we're continuing our journey forward.
And what I'll do, Scott, if outside of the recording, you can give me a link to some of Miller's sustainability work and the reports, if people want to go a little deeper and get in touch and find more about what you're doing.
Sounds fantastic.
All right. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, Ken. Bye-bye.
I'm your host, Ken Alston.